You're listening to the Good Food CFO podcast, where we challenge the status quo of the food industry, celebrate good food founders who are building businesses on their own terms, introduce industry disruptors, and are redefining equitability. If you're ready to build your financial confidence and join the good food revolution to change the way the food industry does business, you are in the right place. I'm the Good Food CFO and your host, Sarah Delavan. Today on the podcast, I've got two special guests joining me for an influencer marketing roundtable. Lindsay O'Donnell is the founder of Piquant Marketing, a full-service marketing agency that helps build communities and brands around food companies who are changing the world. With her agency, Lindsay has worked with over 100 brands and now has a team of over 15 people who specialize in social media marketing, online ads, branding and design, influencer marketing, and more. Becca Murray is a photographer and content creator who has built a career empowering folks to feel comfortable in their skin exactly as they are. She's known as TikTok's cool aunt dad, and her videos run the gamut from plant-based recipes to self-love pep talks to sharing her signature style. Today, Becca is sharing influencer insights, Lindsay provides agency experience, and I've got the money questions you want answered so that you can make the most of your influencer relationships and marketing to generate the largest return on investment possible. We are covering a lot of ground today, so let's get to it. Lindsay and Becca, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
I'm super excited for this episode. I'm really excited about this conversation that we're going to have. But before we really get into it, I want to talk about, we all have an interest in food because we're humans and we eat food. But professionally, our work intersects with food as well. Obviously, listeners of this podcast know that I'm a food business financial consultant, and that's my relationship. Becca, can you talk a little bit about how food and the food industry intersects with the work that you do?
Yeah, so I'm a photographer who has started diving into content creation. So I guess I'm now a content creator / influencer, specifically on TikTok. And I started by talking a lot about body neutrality and eating disorder recovery. And so my relationship with food is a big part of how I built my platform. And I share a lot of, I would say recipes, but more of the way I cook, which is just throw a bunch of stuff together and just I really focus on ingredients over recipes. And people have really responded to it. So
amazing.
Yeah.
And then Lindsay, welcome back to the podcast, I should say to you. Can you remind our listeners the role you play in the food industry?
Yes, I love that you said we all have an interest in food because it does so many different things. For me, food became my form of activism. And when I started doing marketing at Whole Foods Market, I was like, oh, this is my people, because people were using food for their forms of activism. And so eventually I founded a food marketing agency, and we say that we build brands around food companies that are trying to change the world. So food brands that are working towards fair trade, animal rights, environmentalism, veganism, that kind of thing.
I love that so much because what we are really digging into here on the podcast is the good food revolution, right? Which is rooted in the good food movement. And how do we help those founders who are activists through their businesses, right? And the farmers and the ranchers, all of them, they're making political statements, right? They're wanting to change the world. They're talking about the environment. We need those businesses to be successful. We need them to be profitable, to have positive cash flow, for the founders and their team to be able to earn a living, right? So that their businesses can continue, so that we see the change that we want to in our industry. In today's day and age, success for a food business, a good food business, especially, is reaching their audience, reaching their people. And that's what I want to dig into with both of you today. And I'm so excited to have both of you here because you represent different parts of the sort of the messaging and how brands can talk to their consumers. And specifically, I want to talk about influencer marketing. And I want to share a little bit about how this episode came up, because I was talking with a buyer for an independent grocer, and she was like, do you remember when feta went crazy on the internet?
With the baked feta and tomato
Yeah.
pasta.
And she was, she was like, we all of a sudden, like, we didn't know that it like had happened. And suddenly we were like selling out of feta. We couldn't get feta from the distributors. Like our, all of our, sources of like local feta were like dried up. And she was like, it just has such a huge impact on our business and obviously on the brand. And then I had a separate conversation with a brand who was like, we had our product blow up on TikTok. We're not on TikTok.
Yeah.
They thought that they had a virus or like the scam was happening on their Shopify website because they were getting an order a minute or like an order a second or something crazy was happening. And they were like, we've been hacked. And because they didn't know either. And then on the flip side of that, I work with brands who are investing $10,000, more than $10,000 a month in influencer marketing, and they're not seeing this wild and crazy return and activity that I just described. And so I thought, this is an investment that people are making. Social advertising in general and influencer marketing feels to me, as someone kind of outside of that world, as a very specific part of, social and online advertising. And how can we kind of pull back a layer and make this process and, a little bit more transparent and help people out, right? To perhaps be more successful, or just at the bare minimum, understand how it works and how they can go about it.
The lack of transparency in the industry is a huge problem on both sides, honestly, because influencers don't know what they're doing either. Everyone is making it up as they go along, because there's no just like website out there. You can't just like go on Glassdoor and be like, how much do people charge for this thing? And like, what are the job requirements for this role? It doesn't exist.
That's so interesting I didn't think about that. So let's like lay the foundation here before we super get into it. So can one of you tell us what influencer marketing is, and then perhaps how it differs from other types of paid advertising and promotion on social media, just for anyone who's like maybe new to this world?
I mean, I think that this conversation is going to be very interesting from an agency owner and also an influencer. And I just also wanted to say that like, you're giving me flashbacks to like activated charcoal and spirulina, like all having these moments. And the thing is, like, I think one of the biggest disconnects is when brands and like food brands or companies try and like create or manufacture that kind of viral organic moment, and you just simply can't.
Right.
I mean, you can have all the ingredients for it, pun intended, but you can't. But what you can do is you can have a strategy for your influencer marketing. And so I think where a lot of people are dumping a lot of money is trying to force something organic that you can't force, and not being like, hey, like I can actually plan and be strategic on stretching out this content and building long-term relationships. And I think that there's a big disconnect. So I think like on a really surface level, and I'm sure you'll add on this, is influencer marketing is just sort of like, it's like your local celebrity promoting your product. Like you said, it's not regulated. There's no like certification where it's like, this is like an entry-level coordinator influencer. This is an influencer director. I mean, I would say like influencer marketing can be like using like a press release and hoping to get media, or it's like a paid partnership between like a micro celebrity, an internet celebrity.
Okay. Becca, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think it's about brand awareness. And I think those long-term relationships are sort of the important thing. People, especially on TikTok, it is not an ad-friendly space. Anything that even like remotely has a whiff of an ad, people are like, no, thank you. I'm swiping before I even engage with it. And people really do want things that people that they like are using and liking. And so it is about creating those relationships and not necessarily looking at it the way that you would. I know there's a lot of going to be questions about like ROI and stuff, but I think it's just thinking about it in terms of those traditional ad terms is really difficult in a space like that where it is more relationship driven.
That's really interesting. So we talked a little bit already about like what roles you play in the food industry, but if we're going to kind of get boil it down a little bit more in terms of in influencer marketing, Becca, you're the influencer.
I came up in acting, actually, is like how I moved to Los Angeles and what I was doing originally. So I think it's an interesting thing now being on this side of it, understanding how commercials work, being a person who used to book commercials. And as a commercial actor, you are a person being hired to say lines that are written by someone else, produced by someone. Everyone understands that it's an ad, and everyone understands the place of an advertisement in media.
Right.
It is different as an influencer. You are literally becoming the face of that brand, no matter how small it is. You are associated with it. People will ask you questions about their orders. People will ask you customer service related things that have nothing to do with you. People will put their thoughts and feelings about that brand on the influencer who is creating content for that brand. It is no longer just like, I was hired for a job. I know that I am incredibly picky about the stuff that I take for that reason. And I think that it's really important to sort of think about that in advance. I think that's where the relationship part of it plays in. It's like you want to be creating long-term relationships with people who really like your thing and can work with you on it, as opposed to just hiring people for a one-off project that feels like, oh, that came and went, and did they even use that thing anymore? Like, I bought it because they used it. And now I feel bad about it because now I see them hawking something else.
Right. Yeah. As an influencer on TikTok, you're representing brands. You're sharing information about brands that you believe in, that you actually use, and that you have some sort of a relationship with, in order to feel like, yes, this is something that I want to share with my audience. And then Lindsay, within your agency, what kind of a role do you play in influencer marketing? Sort of, I would imagine you are an intermediary between someone like Becca and a brand. Can you tell us a little bit about the work you do there?
A lot of times brands will hire us to be their entire marketing department. So we're the ones recommending or not recommending if they do influencer marketing, how they partner, who they should partner with, and whether it's like a good fit for them. I will say that we don't do influencer marketing on its own because it's all relationship. And so it might take us like an hour, 2 hours to do a huge campaign, but like we've spent years building up these relationships, and we can't actually control the experience. Same thing with like what Becca was saying about not being able to control the quality. So if you pay us a small amount of money, we're risking these relationships, but then it's like the product isn't delivered on time to the influencer. They don't have a good experience. So for like, we are the intermediary, but just adding on that point about relationships, we don't do influence marketing simply on its own. So people have hired us for just influencer marketing. We've done it, and I won't do it again for that reason. So yeah, and we're also saying like, this is how you should work with them. This is what you should expect. And this is how we should be like reusing the content.
Interesting. And to dig into the relationship bit a little bit more, even like the fact that you don't do it as a solo service, let's say, I'm kind of gleaning from that answer also that like you shouldn't put all of your eggs in that basket. The one type of paid promotion we do via social is influencer marketing, right? Like, it's got to be part of a mix.
It's hard to explain because I generally recommend doing one thing and mastering it. So it's like, okay, get on Instagram and master it. But I would never do that for influencer marketing because I would put it in the bucket of like PR, because it's part of a process. Like an influencer brings awareness and then drives traffic. So unless you have like a strong landing page, a good relationship, it's something that amplifies what you have. How are you using it? Like, are you using the content to repurpose in ads? Are you using it to build an ambassador program? And something I can talk about later is like, you just can't force that sort of authentic relationship. I think that a lot of brands are trying to recreate their biggest fans. Like they want to find somebody with a huge following, and they're like, oh, we want you to be like our biggest fans. And I had a supplement company, sorry, a little side story, but I had a supplement company and they had this like supplement that people loved. It was like an iron supplement. And they were like, people rave about it. And we spent months trying to find influencers, and we were like, oh, you're a runner, you should try this supplement. And it's like, you simply can't find and create a problem for people and then be like, here's like a wonderful solution. You should lean into the people that have already had that profound transformation. So that's not to minimize like the work that Becca does, because it still has its place and it is absolutely effective. It's just, I think that's another disconnect of people trying to like recreate that experience or that like super fan and hoping that somebody with 1 million followers can speak to it or have that experience of like somebody who naturally had that transformation from their product to brand.
So this is interesting because one of the things I wanted to talk about was like how a product ends up on, I'll say on someone's feed, right? Or on your channel or whatever. Sometimes it's paid for and sometimes it's not. And I remember, because Becca and I speak outside of this podcast. She's also my photographer. All the photos on the website were taken by her. So thank you, Becca. But you had shared with me that someone had sent you salts and you
Yes.
tried them and you loved them and you shared them on TikTok. And there were results that were very good for that brand. Do you have a paid partnership now?
So now I'm an affiliate with them now. So I make commissions off of the sales, and we are partnering on a custom salt. So I will be doing like so I'm working on that right now. Hopefully it'll be launching on Small Business Saturday. But we are, coming up with a custom like seasoned salt that will be my flavor. And then I will have like a percentage of those sales in addition to my affiliate link.
And I think that sort of speaks to what you were saying, Lindsay, right? Like this product ends up in your world. You have an actual feeling about it, right? Relationship to it, such that you're sharing it with your audience, your friends, your fans, right? And then the relationship can evolve. So now there is a more formal partnership, but it's rooted in something very real. And it speaks to Becca, you being like, I didn't just talk about this once and then never use it again.
Well, and the person who sent it to me is a follower of mine who reached out and said, because I'm very intentional about not accepting like just blanket PR. I only want stuff that I actually want in my life. I don't want a PR closet in my house. So this person reached out and just said, hey, I work for this company. I feel like these salts would go really well in your kitchen, specifically on these dishes that I've seen you cook on TikTok. Can I send you some? Like no pressure, just I think you'd really like them. And that is absolutely the best way to get in my good graces, to say, you don't have to post about this. I just think you'll like it. And so she sent them to me and I tasted the first one and then I was like, oh crap, I need to taste these on camera because they're so good. And then when I talked to the founder of the company, he said that they've had, things blow up with other people before, individual salts. I was the first person who had sold, like the most frequently purchased thing after my video was the entire package of everything that they sold because I was so excited about all of them, but it was totally natural. And then since then, obviously I have them in my kitchen, so I use them in videos and I'll tag them when I use them. But it's not like technically an ad because there's no, an advertisement is paying you up front. Affiliate commissions are like a different situation. But yeah, it was all like very organic in the beginning.
Yeah. And so one of the big questions that I had was, how does a product end up on an influencer's channel or feed or video? And so can you break down, like, obviously this person reached out to you and was like, hey, I want to send you product. And it sounds like you don't have people just blindly sending you things, or does that still happen?
That still happens. I have a PO box, so people will just like randomly send stuff, but if nobody's asked about it and it's not like the most amazing thing ever, I feel like no desire desire to post about it, but I don't feel any obligation whatsoever. Like if somebody asks if they can send me something and they do and I don't love it, I'll honestly give them feedback sometimes about why it is that the thing didn't feel right for me or for my followers or whatever. Or sometimes I'll just let it slide. But people will randomly send things. A lot of people will email and say, hey, I thought that you would like this. All of my most fruitful partnerships, I guess, have come through either someone who follows me, who knows my content, who either works for a company or like tags somebody in, sending me something that they know that I will like.
Okay. And then Lindsay, when you do work with brands who are working with influencers, do you have And I'm not asking like for you to like give recommendations necessarily. It's just sort of like, these are the many ways. And the point of the question is like, paying someone to talk about your product is not like the only way to get your product into their feed and into their hands and their videos. And I think what Becca shared about the relationship, like when someone actually follows a person and can reach out, it's like a warm email, right? Hey, I know these things about you and I'm making this recommendation for you. I think that that's a great kind of piece of advice to people. Do you have anything else sort of like in that realm, or like a recommendation that you give to your brands when they're reaching out to someone for the first time?
Yeah, I would say there's like 3 ways it gets in an influencer's hand. It's like luck, paid or non-paid. And like, as Becca said, like you have to do your research no matter what, which is why I have yet to find like an influencer program that I would prefer using over our own research. Like, there's like all these programs where it's like, find like this influencer with this following. I also find like a lot of times influencers that are in those programs, the purpose of their channel is to monetize. And oftentimes I feel like their audience is a little bit numb to it. They're so conditioned to seeing ads that it's like, yours isn't going to pop. So when we kind of do our research, we're going to look at somebody who might veer into what I call it professional couponer. That's like every other post, and they don't have any personal relationship with the products that they're pitching. And so I don't feel like it's a value for my brands to be on that feed, because it'll just be like another thing. It's like being in a flyer. However, I will say that there are programs, like there's one, I don't know if it's in America, but there's one in Canada called Social Nature, and they have like a huge mass influencing program. And that this is if you have like thousands of samples, but their main thing is that like, yeah, we'll talk about it, but really you're getting feedback on your product and reviews. So I think that there kind of is like but this is like, I say this, but a mass influencer program can really work with people you don't know if there's sort of like different elements to it. Yeah, I think that you need to do your research and it has to be personalized. I think people think that like your product or your brand is like your hard work. It costs you so much money and time, but when you pitch it to an influencer, you're asking them to work for you. So do your research. Like you're offering to, in our minds, we're giving you something. It's so much valuable, but what you're asking is like hours of work. So if you're going to do that, like really make sure that you think it's going to be a good fit, that it will enhance their life, that it will enhance the value for their audience. So I think just understanding that even if your product is expensive and beautiful and all your hard work, that what you're actually asking is a favor.
Yeah. Becca, thoughts on that?
Yep. Yes. Shout that from the rooftops. I think brands get frustrated when influencers ask for things for free because they think that they can just get away with getting things because they have a following. And influencers get frustrated when brands ask them to create content for free because it's the same thing. And I feel like everyone is just like, but my thing is so good. I'm like, yes, and so I think that the creating the relationship part is sort of vital, at least to the way that I work.
Yeah. It seems that like, sure, you could go to a network and spend money, right? And have this group of influencers put your product in their feed, but it seems less likely to get the results of the alternative, which is get to know people online who would actually like your product and utilize your product, create a relationship with them, not, send them a message, right? Ask their permission to send them something and then send it without pressure, right? That seems like a great recipe for potential success, right? There's still the chance that like your product isn't something that they love, which is fine. Everyone is not your perfect customer. I think that's a potentially like really big learning point for people considering influencer marketing. So thank you for that. Is there anything else you want to add before we kind of move to the business side of things and kind of dive into the numbers a little bit more?
A big disconnect and problem is like, ask for what you want, but be okay when somebody says no. And that goes for both sides. Like I have brands that like send free product and then never hear anything and never see it posted. And like, it's fine. So you can reach out and ask for something for free, but be really clear, and then be fine if they're just like, I have to be paid or have to try it first with no promises, and vice versa. Like I have no problems with influencers reaching out or brands reaching out. It's when, you know, you get upset and you're like, but they never promised anything and you never made it clear. So if you are going to send out a product and say it's an expensive product, be clear. Like, I would love for you to try it. And if you like it, could you feature it in your stories? That person, I don't know, this is just maybe Becca, you would disagree, but it's like, I just think like, be clear, and both sides have boundaries. Like, as an influencer, say, I'd be happy to, I make no promises and I will get back to you. It's sort of like, you know, it's kind of like, it never hurts. Anything unpaid, there's no promises, but I think you can say, it's like, I would love to send you this, no expectations. If you love it, a Facebook review is so appreciated, but like, be clear what you're expecting. Like, don't send something, never communicate that, and then be upset that they didn't speak about it.
Right.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree on that. I think like, I have a pretty blanket response to people of just like, I don't guarantee dedicated videos for gifted product. And that doesn't mean that I'm not going to put it in a PO box haul, or that I'm not going to, you know, like, there are other ways that that can show up, but like, making a video about that thing, that's most likely not going to happen unless it's something I'm head over heels for. And so I think when people respond to that with, oh yeah, of course, totally get it, then we can have a conversation about what it would look like if I decided that I liked it and I wanted to do something with it. But if people get feisty about that off the bat, and it's like, okay, we're good.
Yeah. So I want to dig into the business side of things a little bit. And I think my first question is, I mean, I know what it takes to get ready for a podcast episode, right? Like, there's preparation that goes into that. I know what it takes to make a reel about an article that I read that I have thoughts and opinions about. I don't think that those two things are the same as creating an ad, right? And to use that word in a paid relationship. So can you share a little bit about what goes into creating a piece of content for a brand, just to kind of help people understand that?
Yeah, it is different for every brand. And obviously it's going to be different for every influencer, right? But for the most part, I will get some sort of brand guidelines from them. All of my content is very off the cuff. I don't plan anything. I'm very reactionary in my content, either to like what I'm seeing online or what's going on in my life. And I think that, yeah, folks tend to respond to that because it's whatever I happen to be passionate about at that given moment in time, and it translates. So I don't like write a script or anything like that. I just sort of film something, do a couple of takes till it feels right, send it to a brand, they approve it or don't. Usually they do. And then we come up with, post date and all that jazz. For me, like, because my stuff isn't super produced, I do some edits, but it's generally just like putting together a bunch of clips. It's not like I'm doing like a full production.
Right.
Yeah. And so it just depends on the brand as to like how done I feel like I have to be. If I'm doing like a clothing brand or something, usually it's like, okay, how do I do want to think about like, what else am I wearing in that video? How is my hair done? What jewelry am I wearing? Because 100% of the time people are going to ask about other things that are not the thing that I am pitching. So I need to make sure that they also align brand wise, like value wise, with the thing that because I do a lot of sort of like value aligned brands, a lot of like sustainable, size inclusive and all of that, like inclusive brands. I want to make sure that everything that is in frame, it sort of works with that.
From the brand side, Lindsay, in your experience, what kind of preparation goes into working with an influencer?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I try to make my clients understand is like, if you want to be in a magazine, you're paying for those subscribers. If you're hiring a photographer, you're hiring that you're hiring that expertise. And an influencer, oftentimes you're paying for all of those things, right? You're asking for the creation and access to the audience. And so being really, really clear about what you want. I mean, I also think like the more you pay, the more you can ask, but you want that person to have creative freedom. And what I mean by like the more you can ask is like, hey, like we don't say these things. Like I had like a vegan sauce company and they had to be clear, like, hey, don't put this on salmon. Or like don't put it on tofu because we're soy free, like things that you wouldn't think about. The best preparation, it actually wasn't one of my brands, but an influencer friend sent it over where it's like a 5-page PDF. And it was like, they had clearly just inputted her picture and like changed a few sentences, but it was like, hey, we chose your brand because we love the photos look like this. White background, you feature healthy food, flat lay. We'd love to work with you. This is what we're looking for. Like, this is our vibe. It was obvious that they were going to repurpose the content in multiple different ways. So just being clear about what you want, what you need them to do, but at the same time, like, you're hiring their creative freedom. And if it pops out in a bad way on their feed that it doesn't sound like them, then like, what's the point? But the best way you can prepare is just saying like, hey, we want you to recreate the kind of content that you're already creating that looks like this. You don't choose an influencer because you love their photo products. And then when they work with you, they create like a weird video, you know?
Yeah.
So just being mindful that it's like, you want their creative expertise, you want it to fit in with their content, but be really clear. Like, if you get something back and you're like, well, we forgot to mention it can't be on tofu, we can't use any of this, you know? So it sounds like it can be frustrating on the influencer's part. Give enough information to an influencer that it makes it helpful and isn't annoying. So yeah.
The do's and don'ts are really helpful. Like, I personally, like, I curse in my videos. And so it's really good for me to know if like the brand doesn't want cursing. I can make it 30 seconds without doing it, but like, it also will, you know, if they're down for it, it also feels like me. But I think, some of the best sort of initial conversations I've had with brands who are sort of cold reaching out has been them linking past videos saying, hey, we'd love to do something like this or this or this with, you know, these pieces.
The only thing I'd add is some things that brands don't think to ask for, and to be clear, because sometimes influencers will charge more, is a non-compete clause. Like, hey, I don't want you to post about a competitor for 6 weeks because an influencer will likely charge you more. Hey, we want to use this in ads. There's like a white label fee. So sometimes you think this is assumed, or like, don't delete the post. It like, you think it's obvious, or like, but for some people it's not, and like, that's totally fine. But then an influencer's like, well, I have a different fee if you're making me give up business for 6 weeks. So those are some kind of things you kind of have to think about. Like, okay, it may seem obvious that I don't want them to delete the post, but like, no, I don't.
Depending on how it performs. That's like, and whether or not they're doing anything else coming up, and also the link in bio, whether it is actually the only link there, or whether it is like you click to your link tree or your website or whatever, and all of the links are there and it's just in it.
What just popped into my head is like something that I think you said earlier on, Lindsay. Becca has a business. This is a business. This is part of your career, right? And you're asking someone to do something for you, right? And so it's like, whenever we're asking someone to do a job for us, it behooves us to be very clear about what our expectation is, right? So then, depending on your boundaries, capabilities, whatever it might be, you can decide if you're right to work with one another, right? That's part of it when you have a business contract with someone. But it's also, I mean, the non-compete thing never crossed my mind, because you're asking someone to alter their business, right? If you're changing the link in bio, what is that taking away? What opportunity cost is associated with that for Becca, right? And for her business? That's fascinating to me to think about, because of course, I mean, this is a financially focused podcast, right? I want to talk about this topic so that people don't, I'm going to use the word, waste money or spend money without a return on their investment. That's what we want. But in that conversation, we also need to talk about what is realistic to pay someone for their time, for their audience, for their expertise, and for what they're potentially giving up based on our requests of them. So I just had like a big ding, like kind of moment. So I had to say it out loud in case other people were having it too.
I don't think that folks realize what a big deal it is to take over someone's link in bio for 72 hours. Not only are like all of your affiliate links and everything that you make money from there. I just had what people are calling Soupgate on TikTok, where I made a soup recipe and I typed it all out and I put it at the link in my bio because I knew that people were going to ask about it. And soup is just like a thing where you throw stuff in a pot, right? But I was like, people are going to be mad if they can't find this. And everyone was mad that it wasn't in the video. And like, it turned into like this whole thing, but it's like a big question about, and then I had to do I was doing a partnership with a brand, and that like brand thing had to be in my bio for 72 hours. And so then the link to the soup recipe, what couldn't even be there. So then it was just like people were like doubly mad because it was like, I said it was there and now it's not there anymore. And they have no way to get there unless I'm like typing out links, which you can't do in a TikTok comment or caption anyway. And so it's like a whole, it's a whole situation. I just think, there's a lot more, there's a lot of like butterfly effect stuff, right? Like this one tiny change affects all of these other pieces.
Yeah. Particularly TikTok, because you'll be seeing videos months old. Like Instagram, that generally doesn't happen, but I've seen videos where it's like, click the link in my bio for a free PDF download or something. And I go there and it's like nowhere to be found. And then I'm like, wait, how long? Like, it's not as intuitive as other platforms as like, oh, this is like a really old video. So that can be problematic. I think too, like I have a girlfriend that's an influencer and she used to do a ton of free stuff and now she doesn't, which is totally fine. And she's always on Instagram and TikTok complaining about people asking for free stuff, which kind of bugs me because I'm like, I personally, this might be controversial. I'm like, I think you need to think of yourself as a magazine. Like people send free stuff all the time. So don't be offended that they ask, just say no. You know what I mean? Like, just say no, just the same way you would like ask to send, like you can send media drop-offs, media gift baskets. So, it is a ton of work, but some big accounts still do things for free. Sometimes they don't. You just kind of like, I'm like, don't just say no and don't be offended either way. If you're asking a big brand, I don't like when big brands complain either. It's both ways. I'm diplomatic.
Yeah. So when we talk about, return on investment, how can we talk about it so that it makes sense, right? Like from a brand whom I've, seen the numbers for where there's a lot of spend on influencer marketing and no uptick in sales. It's like, I just want to help that person and other founders like them. And I think through what we've talked about already, there's a lot of advice, right? There's a lot of recommendations about how to find the right ones and how to build a relationship with them and how to approach sending them product, which I think is really helpful. But if we reach the point where we're going to get into a paid partnership with them, what are the things that they should be considering when they come to someone with a budget? Do you base, your rate on, for example, the number of eyeballs that typically see a video of yours? Or like maybe just how can we help people to potentially have some frame of reference for what a partnership might cost? And the big disclaimer is Becca's one person. And so this is not representative of everyone.
Also, I'm one person with 370,000 followers, not one person with 1 million or 5 million or 10 million followers. It's going to be very different. As far as I understand, from literally every influencer that I have spoken with or seen talk about how they started charging, everyone charges $500 to start. Someone reaches out and says, can you do this thing? How much? What's your rate? And everyone goes, oh shit, I don't have a rate. I don't know what rates are. And then quick Google search, and then you can't find anything. They're like, $500. And then the brand says yes. And then they're like, okay, so next time I will say $1,000. And then next time I will say $1,500. And you just like keep kind of inching up to see where negotiations start. And then you're finally in a place where you can. And Victoria Paris, actually, who's just like a very big influencer, but just did a series of videos on this that showed up on my FYP, and she was talking about how she went from like $500 to like, I got a million followers, like how about $10,000? And then all of a sudden it was like, well, most people didn't blink an eye at $10,000. How about $20,000? And then she was like, oh shit, I have a living now.
Yeah. Is there any, as the financial consultant for brands, do you do any reporting back to the brand on, or like, do they do any reporting back to you on like the success of the campaign?
I have only had one person ever, one brand ever, who has like reported back to me, and he literally told me that his financial advisor told him not to. like, don't tell her how much money you made off of her. And he was like, no, I feel like this is good. Cause like we're having a relationship and like creating a relationship that has been really fruitful for both of us. But yeah, I give analytics to the brand if they ask for it. I don't have a problem with that. And I think that a lot of people probably do. It hasn't been required for a lot of my partnerships, but yeah, if people ask, I will give that info.
And the reason I asked is because it's like, I was talking to a brand who I said I would keep the brand confidential. They're the one who got like surprise TikTok talked about, and their sales were happening like one per like minute or whatever it was. They were in communication with the influencer, and it was like, oh, if you wanted to actually do this as an ad, it would cost you like $10,000+. And in their opinion, they were like, we haven't seen how all of the pennies are going to fall yet, because we're actually still like in the midst of delivery and all of that. But like, we think it would be worth that much money. So it's just like, we're talking about return on investment, right? It's like $10,000 is a lot of money, especially for a small and emerging brand. And I think I'm just trying to think like, how much are we making on that? Like, is it really beneficial? Is there a long-term benefit, to it? Because I think a big thing with social marketing, and Lindsay, you can probably speak to this, is like when you pay for an ad and you bring people to your website, there is that value from the first purchase, but there's also that lifetime value as well, which is why I think data is so interesting. You know what I mean? Like, here's how it performed in the first month, and here's how it's performing, continuously. And then the brand telling you, I love transparency, right? The brand being like, we raked in, I'm making this number up, $50,000 in revenue, right? Which resulted in this financial benefit to our company at the end of the day. I would love to continue this relationship with you. I think that benefits both parties,
Yeah. I mean, the one thing that I'll add for that is oftentimes we've been using the $10 per post per 1,000 followers as like a baseline. And I say baseline because it also based on like how engaged their niche is. Are they really experienced in videography? So like I tell influencers, like never charge anything less than $10 per 1,000 followers per post. I mean, different industries are going to have different costs per thousands, but like we've worked with like tiny micro influencers who have gotten a much better return than on someone who has like 250,000, just because it's like so much more niche. So if you're like starting out and you have no idea what to charge, that's like a good place to start. I've also worked with influencers who are like, I hate blogging. So if you want to blog, it's like this crazy price because I hate it. And like, that's fine. Like that's you can, in your mind, you can be like, this is my hourly rate. So it's actually not based on my followers. It's based on my expertise. The other thing is like a lot of our clients like don't actually tell us their revenue, and we're their agency. So I'm not surprised that they're not telling influencers. I love when they give us analytics, but I also want to say to brands, like, sometimes if an influencer partnership doesn't work, it's not the influencer. Same thing with like the agency and the ads. Like we'll be like, we drove 100,000 people to your website and no one bought. It's not the ads.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's like a good analytic with an influencer partnership is like, do you love the content? Did you get good feedback? Did you enjoy the partnership? And did people get engaged? Did they drive traffic to it? So, sometimes there's like missing links and it's not necessarily like the influencer. And there's been a really big movement from just like a one-off influencer partnership to like stretching that to arms and legs. So in terms of ROI, like if you're like, I'm going to spend $1,000 on this influencer, okay, I need this much in sales, but you know what? I don't have to hire a videographer because now I'm going to use this in ads. I'm going to use it on the website. So I think like when we're talking with clients, it's like, well, let's look at the way an influencer is like filling up these different tasks. And that's why their price is what they're paying, is like we built assets. Studies have shown that like, if you're running like a bunch of different ads, there's one ad podcast I follow, and they were like, oh, when we cut off our Facebook ads, the effectiveness of our Google ads dropped. So one thing you can do is like test your influencer marketing is like turn it off and on and see if the other touch points start dropping down, because it could just be like, maybe people are just like building their awareness and education and they're saving the post. And then later they get on their computer and they search it. So that's like a good way to measure ROI. But yeah, like add like a safety net in the sense of like, oh, we had no sales, but we got photos, we got videos, we got a testimonial. Like like, don't stretch your influencers thin, but there's so many places that an influencer can enhance the customer journey.
I think it's interesting. I didn't know that you could ask for the video, let's say, or, I never thought about, because again, this is not my world, reusing the content. That's fascinating. And Becca and I have had that conversation, not here on the podcast, but separately in terms of photography, right? Like, how are you going to use the photo? How you intend to use the photo and the stretch that gets is directly related to the cost of that photography, right? And because of the value that it will have. And so what you're opening my eyes to is like, you're not just paying for one moment in time, right? And one influencer video. But I think that, as with our last conversation, Lindsay, like, we were talking about trade shows and conferences, right? And so it's like, you could pay a ton of money and show up and just do that, or you could show up, do that, and that can have legs, right? You can do a lot more with the content and the information.
I think another thing that I didn't necessarily recognize before I was in this space, and it kind of goes into that, is that using something as an ad and opening up someone's image and videos to an audience that is not their audience is also something that comes at a higher price point because of just the nature of being online. Like, your audience cares what you have to say because they follow you and they like you already. Like, if you're taking my video and running as an ad, just like blanket across the board, it is going to get a very different response. I will say, specifically as someone who is in a niche of being like a fat content creator, like, it is going to get a different response than if it ends up in a different part of TikTok or Instagram or whatever than the people who are used to seeing me. And so that comes at a premium price because it's not something that just mentally I have any desire to deal with.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing too is, like, Becca can't have 5 ad campaigns running at once. And also, what if she signed a deal with like Kanye and Adidas a year ago? Like, there's a certain amount of risk and lack of control that you take. I mean, we love using influencer content. We generally we'll be like, hey, we'll run it for like a week to 6 weeks or a month to 6 weeks after, because they're like, you have to be hyper vigilant about your own brand and who you partner with. But that's like why there's going to be an extra cost.
Well, I have learned a lot, but I feel like, just to rehash, like, my biggest takeaways is the relationship piece. I think that's huge. I think knowing the person, by following them, becoming aware of what their likes are, what their dislikes are, who their audience is, right? Is their audience overlap? You know what I mean? Like, I remember talking to a brand and it was like, our target consumer is this. And then all of the influencers that they were working with didn't match up to that for me. And we kind of had a conversation about it. I was just like, I don't see that person in these people, you know what I mean? That are promoting your product. And it was just something that I, mentioned to them. And it's like, that other audience might also like your product and use it, but there's a disconnect about who you're trying to drive and who you're trying to reach and the people who are showcasing the product, right? So I think that is probably part of it too, is knowing your audience and knowing that there's some amount of overlap. You want to introduce it to new people, but you want them to be your people.
Yeah, it's interesting because one of my sort of bigger partnerships that started with someone tagging this guy in my comment section, and then he sent me a free play suit. It's the just like a jumpsuit onesie situation. He had designed those for himself as like, a gay man in like festival wear, basically, like cozy. I can like dance around, and it's got a big deep plunging V to show off my bare chest and like all of the things. And the people that he had been working with and sending places to up until that point were people who looked like him, and he was selling within that community. And I was the first I think woman, but also just like sort of person in the body neutrality space that he had sent something to. And he was like, who the fuck are you? Because you just sold out my website and I have no idea. He was able to, I guess, capitalize on people saying, oh, this person, I think you don't know that she's your people, but she is your people. And then he reached out and then discovered that there was an entire market that he didn't know existed for this thing.
Yeah. That tiny overlap segued into a whole new market.
Yeah. Like to add on that, I just wrote down like 5 like quick tips that like I think kind of align. Like I've been told by influencers that anything less than 15% off isn't worth it for a coupon code. So don't bother giving them like unless it's like a high ticket item, like really you're not going to get attention. That repetition is key. I've heard influencers complain that's like, I was booked for one post and like, really it's like anything, like you need me to talk about it a few times. So if you want the most results, the third is that surprise and delight them. Like they are your customers. Number 4 is that influencers talk. They know who pays late. They know who's not pleasant. They know who like is kind of a pain. And you really enhance that. Like, remember we talked about like the first way to go viral with influencers is like luck. And then there's paid and unpaid. Nice branding makes a huge difference. Like, do people want to talk about it? Do they want to like associate themselves with like your product? And if you kind of have like janky old packaging, it's like people want content to share with their audience. And they're like, oh, this is like beautiful. I'm impressed. I want to share it with you. So nice branding and packaging like absolutely increases your chance of people wanting to talk about it. And that can also be the product itself, like the activated charcoal lattes or like blue spirulina or whatever.
I think on the repetition point, you think of it like a billboard, they've done all that stuff about like, you have to pass a billboard so many times before you actually follow up and look at the product once you are back at home or at your desk. And I think it's the same sort of thing with influencer marketing. You're scrolling, you're like seeing this thing over and over again. And it's like, at some point it lodges itself in there.
Yeah. This has been so informative, but I know that, Lindsay, you're such an amazing resource. I follow you on Instagram. Someday I'll get on TikTok and follow you there. And it's going to be your fault that I get there, Lindsay, because she's constantly saying like, you need to be on TikTok. You need to be on TikTok. I had a conversation with my marketing person the other day, Chelsea, and I was like, we're going to end up on TikTok. And she goes, and it's going to be Lindsay's fault. It's Lindsay's fault. And I was like, it is.
Yes. I only speak TikTok now. The language I speak.
It is a very specific language.
Whether people are on Instagram or TikTok, where can they find you and follow you and learn more about what you do?
Yeah. So it's Piquant. You can call us Piquant, Piquant, Piquant Marketing, Instagram, TikTok. And then we have a lot of free events. So whenever this airs, we have a free day-long seminar with trainings, including TikTok, as well as free group coachings. But you have to be on our newsletter to know about that. But everything is always in the link of my Instagram bio. So if you ever need to know anything, Piquant Marketing, everything's in the link, like my life is in the link to my Instagram bio.
Perfect. How about you, Becca?
Yeah, the Becca Murray on TikTok and Instagram, and also my entire life is at the link in my bio.
I love it. Well, I thank you both so much for being here. We're heading into Small Business Saturday, so we're going to keep a lookout for your salt, Becca.
Fingers crossed.
If it does indeed launch that day. And I don't know, as women who founded and run small businesses, do you guys have anything you want to kind of say in celebration of Small Business Saturday?
Just like as a consumer, have always tried to put my money where my mouth is in terms of my values and who I support. And it is really fun and probably one of my favorite parts of this new job that I have created for myself, to be able to uplift other small brands and then also women-owned brands and queer women-owned brands and fat queer women-owned brands, women of color-owned brands, and just like making sure that I am, putting my money where my mouth is. I think that and being able to open other people's eyes to small businesses that they didn't know existed has been a really rewarding part of this job.
Yeah.
My takeaway for small business owners, particularly to marketing, and I've been saying this for the past year, is it can be really overwhelming. And you know what? Like, our time is so scarce and valuable But like, don't do anything you don't like. Like, if you don't like Facebook, don't get on Facebook. If you don't want to do TikTok, don't get on TikTok. And like, do not have the audacity to do something boring. So like, your marketing should be an extension. You've dedicated your life to your business. So your marketing should be fun. It should like light you up. So the people you work with should excite you. And even if you work with like an influencer and it doesn't get sales, but you like loved meeting them and it was such a great experience, like, isn't that kind of what it's all about in some degree? So if you're looking for like what you should do in marketing, who you should work with, like, at the end of the day, it should light you up. It should make you feel good. Don't do anything where you're like, everyone says this person's popular, or we should be doing this, or I need to get on LinkedIn or whatever. Like, it's not fun for you creating it. It's not fun for somebody digesting it. So that's my like, small business owners, you get to do what you want and you get to not do what you don't want to do.
That aligns so perfectly with our motto, which is build a business on your own terms, right? Like, do what makes you happy, partner with people that will actually pay you the price you need to be paid and should be paid for your product or your service, right? We didn't get into business to not make money. We did it to serve the world in some capacity, right? Help individuals, help communities, right? Create change on some level. Absolutely enjoy it. Do it the way that you want to do it. And then celebrate the heck out of it this Small Business Saturday. And I think every day. Lindsay and Becca, I just want to thank you again for being here. I learned a lot during this episode. If you listened and you enjoyed, or maybe you had an aha moment, or maybe you have a question, a follow-up question for one of the ladies or myself, tag us on Instagram, The Good Food CFO. We're not on TikTok yet, but you can also find me on LinkedIn, and you can always email the podcast. You can email jointheconvo@thegoodfoodcfo.com. Let us know what you thought about the episode. Send us your questions and let us know what else you want to hear on the show. Thank you so much. We'll be back with a brand new episode in 2 weeks.